me from Tel Aviv is Mordechai Kadar. He is a professor. He's a Israeli scholar of Arabic culture, a lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. Mordechai, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
It's my pleasure, my honor.
Mordechai, I want to talk a little bit before we get into the topic of your eight-state solution and some of your views on the international scene. I just want to ask you a question about Israeli domestic politics, if I may, and that is the condition of the Jewish people religiously. And I'm not talking about the ultra-Orthodox. I'm talking about average Israelis and their relationship to their religion, if any. What is the religiosity of average Israeli Jews, secular Israeli Jews?
Well, in this regard, the Israeli society actually resembles a whole array of approaches to Judaism as a religion. The people who are totally detached from any kind of Jewish religion or any kind of Jewish religious remnants, I would say, their percentage is very low. For example, it starts from people who might not be Shomer Shabbat, but they will go to Seder Pesach, they will fast on Yom Kippur to some extent, and they define themselves as Jewish before they are Israeli or anything else. If you go more, you can see people who, let's say, would drive their cars on Shabbat, but they will first go to synagogue in the morning. Okay, so there is a whole array of, or continuum of grades of religiosity in Israel. Some of them are, I would say, even define themselves as traditional or Masoretic, as they say, rather than datiyim or religious. So it's a whole continuum. It's not one, but while a very small minority detach themselves from any kind of religious issues.
Right, because that was kind of my understanding that that Israelis are relatively observant just by the virtue of being in Israel, and having access primarily to, for example, kosher food, and that on the Shabbat things generally are more closed, even in Tel Aviv, and that in the de facto sense they are more observant of Judaism just by the very fact of being Israeli.
Well, for many of them, being an Israeli, speaking in Hebrew, living in Israel, serving in the army, paying taxes, being an Israeli, for many of them, this is some kind of a substitute for actual keeping the religion as it is in the diaspora. Because in the diaspora, if you don't keep the mitzvot or minhagim, what makes you Jewish? Nothing. Here, the mere fact that you live in Israel and you speak in Hebrew and so forth, serve in the army, of course, it gives your life Jewish meaning. Although you don't mean it to be so Jewish, but de facto, you are strengthening the Jewish state and the Jewish hold to the ancient Jewish land. So for many Israelis, the Israelihood is some kind of substitute to Jewishness.
No, that in a way makes sense, because in Israel you're not like actively doing and being Jewish, you just are Jewish because that is who you are as an Israeli.
Yeah, and most chances that you meet a Jewish spouse to get married with.
That's right.
Unlike the States. So here, almost by definition, you are Jewish since you live in Israel. Of course, there are all kinds of other opportunities, but if you really want to do other things, but life in general here are colored with the Jewish color. Look, the Israeli flag is like a talit.
It is.
And the Israeli national anthem, Kol od balev penim nefesh Yehudi homia, talk about Jewish soul. And so and the emblem of the country is the menorah with the seven candles. So, being an Israeli by itself has all kinds of Jewish elements. So, for many people, this is a proof that they are Jewish, and they don't need much more. They don't need to keep Shabbat or Hagim or things like this. It's enough for them to live in Israel. So this is more or less. And by the way, some of them do claim that living in Israel makes them better Jews than Jews in the diaspora who would lay tefillin every day and go on Shabbos to shul and so forth.
No, and I think they make a good case for that, because just by being in Israel, they're fulfilling about 2/3 of the commandments of the Torah. Is there a relatively strong Jewish, or is there at all, Jewish education in the public schools for children and for elementary level?
Yes, they do learn Tanakh, means the Bible. They don't learn it from the religious point of view, and it's not meant to convince them to start laying tefillin or keeping Shabbat. It is a matter of knowledge about the heritage and the sources of what Israel is here. In the non-religious school system, they try not to make Judaism into something which will proselytize you to start being too Jewish, as they might say. But definitely they learn about Jewish history. And yes, they also learn about the Chagim, what the Chagim mean, especially from the agricultural point of view, Chag Asif, or Chag Shavuot, which is Chag HaKatzir, the harvesting. Yes, even in the non-religious school system, there are Jewish touches as well.
Now, at my synagogue last Shabbos, we had a gentleman come speak to us from Israel who is a Druze scholar. And he spoke of how proud he was to be an Israeli and serve in the military and be he said that the Druze people in Israel have very high levels of accomplishment in a lot of areas. But his one criticism was of this declaration of statehood that recently came out of Israel. And I don't know the details of this. My understanding is it was a non-binding statement that simply stated that Israel is a Jewish state and that Hebrew is the national language. I guess I want to ask you about that. What is that statement, and why would this man have an objection? He said he felt that it was somehow diminishing to non-Jewish Israelis.
What he relates is to a basic law in Israel, which is parallel to our constitution, because we don't have a constitution. We have some basic laws which do not cover all straits of life. And this one was accepted 2 years ago, which states that the state of Israel is the state of the Jewish people. Hebrew is its official language. And the land of Israel is its land, and the flag, with the kachol lavan, the blue and white, is the Israeli flag. This law definitely was pushed by the right side of the political map.
Yes.
Because of some problems which we faced during the last couple of years, where all kinds of courts, especially the Supreme Court, started to challenge the legitimacy of the being of the state as a Jewish state. So the Knesset expressed the majority's idea that yes, Israel is the state of the Jewish people, and of course, it doesn't diminish or it doesn't reduce the rights of the others. And as you know, the Arab sector in Israel is like 21%. On personal level, they are totally equal like Jews. Their salaries, their rights, except for the duty to serve in the army. The Druze do serve in the army, while Muslims do not, in general.
Right.
Some Druze understood what this law was for, and they accept it, not because they love it, but because they think that the more Jewish the country is, the more democratic it is, and the better it is for them. Because don't forget that the Druze serve in the army, not because the state is their fulfillment of any dream by Druze, but because the state keeps their heads connected to their shoulders.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, the Muslims would chop their head off, because the Druze are viewed as infidels or apostates, even worse, because the Druze once were part of the Islam, and they actually left Islam. And because of this, they are persecuted and chased through the 1,000 years since the establishing of their community. And this is why they usually live in clusters to protect themselves in Lebanon, in Syria, and in northern Israel. Only in Israel they are free to do and to say whatever they like. And they serve in the army because the state actually keeps them alive. So they are with us wholeheartedly. Yet some of them do not understand the reason for this basic law, Israel, the state of the Jewish people. Okay, it needs some explanation, but initially this law didn't change anything on the ground. It is a declarative law. Of course, there could be significant ramifications, but the law itself is a basic law, means some kind of constitution.
Seems to me that it's simply a reiteration of Israel's raison d'etre. I mean, that it is a Jewish state, that Hebrew is the language, Judaism is the religion. It doesn't take away the right of the non-Jewish citizen who is equal in Israel. I think the only thing that is the non-Jewish citizen in Israel is precluded from is, in certain circumstances, the army, and also that the prime minister and president has to be Jewish, which is
no, not at all.
Is that right?
It's not mentioned anywhere that the prime minister should be a Jew or the president. There is no such a thing. It can.
Well, I mean, I don't really think it would be a problem if it was, because, for example, in the United Kingdom, the prime minister has to be Anglican. I mean, it's and the Queen. I mean, so I mean, this isn't some kind of a great injustice. It's that it is a Jewish state, and I would think that you'd want the head of state to be Jewish. But what is the condition presently of the Arab minority, the Israeli Arab minority? Are they loyal, and are they prospering in Israel generally?
Well, it depends whom you ask. Yep. Again, there is a complete array from those who hate the country, who would like to see it as a state of all its citizens without any Jewish or Zionist characteristic. Of course, there you see two main groups. One is what we call Balad, and they are represented in the Knesset, unfortunately, on one side. And the other side is the Islamic movement, which is a Muslim Brotherhood movement here in Israel. They, from the religious point of view, see no right of Jews to have a state.
Right.
Because according to Islam, Jews should live under the Islamic rule as dhimmis, people who live under the auspice of Islam. So Jews have no right to a state, no right to an army, police, or any other manifestation of statehood and independence. So Balad from the national point of view, and the Islamic movement from the religious Islamic point of view, they both see no reason for the mere existence of the state of Israel, and they oppose its raison d'etre. On the other side, you see many Arabs in Israel who prefer to live in Israel as it is, rather than even joining the Palestinian Authority, not to mention becoming an Arab state like Syria or Iraq. The Arab Spring, which started like 9 years ago, changed many Arabs here in Israel, changed their mind vis-a-vis Israel. Israel today is the only stable state in the Middle East, which is not inflicted either by wars or by waves of refugees. And this is why life in Israel is normal in spite of the coronavirus, which we can speak about as well. So the younger you are, the more the chance is that you accept the country and you actually want to be part of it. And as a result, what we see bigger numbers every year of Muslims, and I emphasize Muslims from the Arab sector, who want to volunteer to the army to fight in order
Right.
to defend the state. Many of them go to Sharut Leumi, to the national service, instead of going to the army, especially girls. Volunteer for a year or 2 years to work in hospitals or in all kinds of institutions as a national service, not only because they get some points in the university, but because they want to become part of the society. They do not want to live in the margin, and they want to feel that they are part of the. Of course, they might be willing to see a more equal, I would say, attitude, but there are already some professions who are actually populated by only Arabs. If you go to any pharmacy here in Israel today, you will find that 95% of the workers who actually learned pharmacology, it is not something which you learn at home.
Right.
You need to spend some years in university. I think like 95% of the pharmacologists in Israel are Arabs, both boys and girls, and good so. This is a nice environment, especially for girls, sophisticated, good income, clean environment, nice people. You know, a pharmacy is a good place
job.
for working.
And I think that I understand that. I mean, Israeli Arabs have been pretty successful in Israeli society in all sectors. You have them in the Olympic team, you've seen them in basketball, you've seen them in entertainment. I mean, in any sector you name, you've got Israeli Arabs who are very happy to carry the Israeli flag and be Israeli. And also, for the more radical Islamists, there are other interpretations of the Quran, like you have the Grand Mufti of Rome, Palasi, who has said that the Quran commands that the people of the book, which is what the Quran calls the Jews, are to take possession of that tiny land as a precursor to the coming of the Messiah. So, you know, you have different interpretations even there when it comes to Islamic understanding. It's not all that we're to be seen as dhimmis. I think that's maybe a more political thing on the part of Arab nations.
Politics and religion in Islam are not divided as it is in other cultures. But Palazzi doesn't have so many followers, as you know. What we see today, especially after the coronavirus problem started in the Middle East, you can see today many people in Saudi Arabia standing in front of the camera with their face exposed. And they talk about, yes, we should have full relations with Israel. Israel is a normal country. Israel is a good country. And on the other side, they curse the Palestinians for stopping the Arab world from normalizing the relations with Israel only because of the Palestinian cause. And I think that the biggest loser of the coronavirus crisis in the Middle East are the Palestinians, because what happened here is that every country struggled this pandemic by itself. And the Arab League, as an organization which combines all the Arab countries, actually was totally dysfunctional, had absolutely no role in combating the coronavirus. And every country was left by itself to deal with it by itself. And if you needed any other proof that the Arab nation does not exist as a nation, the coronavirus proved it by the dysfunctionality of this Arab League. And in this case, every country now is more liberated to act in the political arena according to its own interests. And since Saudi Arabia is afraid of Iran, even more than Israel, because Saudi Arabia is targeted on a daily basis by Iranian missiles, which are launched from Yemen and from other places against the Saudis. And we saw what happened in last September to big facilities of oil in Saudi Arabia with the attack from the Iranian drones and missiles. So the Saudis today, especially when they see that America is not rushing to save them from the Iranians, they are looking for other friends. And who is there in the Middle East sharing with them the fear from Iran, if not Israel? So the Saudis today are, I would say, wholeheartedly will have relations with Israel, and from them the Palestinians can jump in the lake. The same thing is with the Emiratis, the
Right.
Emirates,
Right.
and I think Kuwait might also join it, while Qatar still continues to
Hardline.
fund money to the Muslim Brotherhood, to Turkey. And this is actually today the rift inside the Arab and the Islamic world between those who would come to have relations with Israel yesterday and those who oppose it totally.
Well, I mean, some Arab countries would rather have their people die from coronavirus than cooperate with Israel, and that Israel is, from what I understand, developing a very high level of cooperation between scientists in the Gulf states, other than Qatar,
Yeah.
and Saudi Arabia, and that Israel is shipping millions of doses of hydroxychloroquine, for example, to Arab
Yeah.
countries to help their people develop immunity from the disease.
And what happened is that the Emiratis sent an airplane full of equipment against the coronavirus to the Palestinian Authority, and they sent it, and this airplane flew directly from the Emirates and to Ben Gurion Airport in Lod and landed. And the Palestinians refused to accept all this equipment, tons of equipment, which the Emiratis gave them for free. Why? Because this direct flight means, in their eyes, normalization with Israel. And the Palestinians are against it.
Well, you know, the Palestinians, I mean, we could look at the history of that. They've bungled every opportunity going all the way back to the 1930s and to develop a peaceful relationship with Israel, and every time they do, they lose more ground. I mean, the most recent the Trump peace plan is a huge opportunity for them to have a very high level of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, to have connection between Judea and Samaria and Gaza with a corridor, to have a neighborhood in Jerusalem as their capital. I mean, what more could they possibly want? But they won't do this, and it's quite predictable.
They won't do it because their dream is different.
Right.
I'll show you their dream as they draw it on this scarf which they produce, and this is by the PLO. Means this is the flag of the PLO. On one side they say Al-Quds Lana, means Jerusalem is ours, and this is the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock. But the other side is this, Palestine, and the whole country, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And this is again by the PLO, not by Hamas even. Okay, and they see the connection because it's one thing, and they understand that if they have Jerusalem, they will have the whole country, because without Zion, there is no Zionism. And they understand it. This is why they hammer all the time on the issue of Jerusalem, which actually Trump took away from them. So their dream is to have the whole country from the river to the sea. And while Trump comes and tells them, okay, you have a state on part of the country, they don't want only the part, they want the whole thing.
Right.
So
right.
For them, if they accept the deal of the century, it will be the end of their demands. And this is what they have to declare in order to have statehood, that they demand nothing more than what they get. And this is something which is totally against their whole raison d'etre.
Indeed, and I think I should point out for the growing number of anti-Semites out there in the social network, which I've been trying to debate, that the aspirations and the goals of the Zionist movement are very modest and very proper. They are to have Jewish sovereignty in that tiny speck of land that is basically where Israel is today, and which is what the Torah commands. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's not and it's one that was recognized in 1918 by King Faisal of Syria when he signed the Faisal-Weizmann Accord, where he actually had language in there that said modest and proper borders, and it was something that was understood, with the only caveat being that Israel was to respect the rights of the non-Jewish minority and the Islamic holy places, which Israel has done, maybe not perfectly, but pretty consistently. Now, I want to ask you, Dr. Kadar, about what you've proposed on a national, international level, your 8-state solution to the present state of war that Israel exists in. What is that going to look like, and could you describe it?
Well, first of all, the idea behind this 8-state solution is that the Arab world today is roughly divided between two kinds of states, the failing states and the successful states. Failing states, I mean by Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Libya, Syria, of course, Lebanon to a large extent, Algeria, means the modern countries which were established during the 20th century. And they are the failures, while the success are the Emirates in the Gulf. I'm talking about the 7 Emirates of the Union, means Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, and so forth, in addition to Qatar and to Kuwait. Altogether 9 states, 7 united in the United Arab Emirates, and 2 more, Qatar and Kuwait. The failing states are failing because every one of them is a conglomerate of groups which never became a nation. I'm talking about tribal groups, ethnic groups like Arabs and Kurds and Turkmens and Berbers and others, religious groups like Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, Druze, Alawis, and so forth, and sectarian groups, Sunnah and Shia and all kinds of denominations and so forth. The failing states are made of many groups, tribes, ethnic groups, religious and sectarian groups, while the successful states are homogeneous. Every one of them is one single tribe. And this is what makes the difference. It's not the oil, because Dubai has almost no oil and no gas. And Dubai is a heaven on earth without oil, while Iraq and Libya, with a lot of oil, are hell on earth. Means that the element which brings good life to the Gulf Emirates is not the oil. It is the stability of the society in each and every one of these emirates. Look, I'll give you an example. Kuwait is one big tribe named Al Sabah. Al means tribe in this regard. Qatar is Al Thani, the name of the tribe, Al Thani. Abu Dhabi is Al Nihyan. This is the name of the. So whenever you have a state based on a homogeneous society, the state is legitimate. The people are brothers, feel fraternity with each other. Nobody fights anyone, and if people have some kind of a dispute, they go to the sheikh, to the old man of the family to solve the problem. And life is in heaven with oil like Abu Dhabi or without oil like Dubai. While in Iraq, which is divided to 75 tribes, to 10 religions, who knows how many sects, and 4 ethnic groups like Kurds,